The dagger gleamed in the moonlight, pressed against my throat. But his eyes, those piercing, storm gray eyes, held me captive more than any blade ever could. I should have been terrified, kneeling in the damp grass of a Virginia estate, surrounded by soldiers loyal to a nation that despised my own. Yet all I could think was how his touch, even in anger, felt like a memory I'd forgotten. My name is Elias, or at least it is now. Once, I was someone else, someone who loved him, someone who died for him. In my past life, I was Caleb, a soldier of the Free States, sworn to a cause that tore us apart. He was Julian, the golden son of the Dominion, our enemy. We met in secret, in stolen moments beneath willow trees and in shadowed barns, whispering promises we couldn't keep. Our love was a rebellion, a fragile flame snuffed out when I fell in battle. His name the last word on my lips. But fate, it seems, isn't done with us. I've been reborn, not as a warrior, but as a concubine, a supposed gift to Julian, now the Dominion's ruthless general. He doesn't know who I am. He thinks I'm weak, a pawn in his nation's game. But I remember everything. The night air was thick with the scent of roses and gunpowder as Julian loomed over me, his grip on the dagger steady, but his expression wavering. "Speak, concubine," he growled, voice low and dangerous. "Why were you sneaking through my gardens? Are you a spy for the Free States?" I could have lied. I could have played the part of the trembling captive. But something in his gaze haunted. Searching made me bold. "If I were a spy," I said, voice steady despite the blade, "I'd be a poor one to get caught so easily." His lips twitched, a ghost of a smile. And for a heartbeat, I saw the Julian I once knew. The one who laughed with me under starlit skies, who swore he'd burn the world to keep me safe. He lowered the dagger, but didn't step back. "You're fearless for a concubine," he said, eyes narrowing. "Or foolish?" "Maybe both," I replied, rising to my feet, brushing dirt from my borrowed silk robes. The soldiers around us shifted, uneasy, but Julian waved them off. His attention was mine alone, and it sent a shiver through minute of fear, but of something far more dangerous. Hope. This new life was a cruel jest. The Dominion had sent me to Julian's estate as a peace offering, a symbol of submission after years of war between our nations. The Free States, my home, were losing ground, their fields scorched, their people starving. I was meant to be a distraction, a pretty thing to appease the general while his armies crushed my people. But I wasn't here to seduce or submit. I was here to save him, to save us. The estate was a fortress, all towering stone and iron gates, a far cry from the open fields where Caleb and Julian once met. My days were spent under scrutiny, every move watched by servants and soldiers alike. They called me the gift, their voices dripping with disdain. To them, I was no thing, a decoration, a trophy. To Julian, I was a puzzle. He summoned me nightly to his study, questioning me about the Free States, their strategies, their weaknesses. I gave him half-truths, enough to keep him intrigued, but never enough to betray my people. "You know more than you let on," he said one evening, leaning back in his chair, a glass of bourbon in hand. Firelight danced across his face, highlighting the sharp angles of his jaw, the faint scar above his brow, a scar I'd once traced with trembling fingers. "Why do you protect them? They sent you here to die." "They sent me here to live," I countered, meeting his gaze. Maybe I'm not the one who's lost. He laughed. A low, bitter sound. You think you can outweep me? I've broken stronger men than you. Then break me, I said, stepping closer, my heart pounding. Or try. He stood, towering over me, his breath warm against my skin. For a moment, I thought he might kiss me or kill me. Instead, he turned away, dismissing me with a wave. Go, he said, voice rough. Before I changed my mind. Nights bled into weeks, and the tension between us grew like a storm on the horizon. I caught glimpses of the old Julian, the one who'd sneak me apples from his family's orchard, who'd hum folk songs when he thought no one was listening. But this Julian was harder, forged by war and betrayal. He trusted no one, least of all me. Yet he kept me close, as if drawn by some instinct he couldn't name. One night, during a rare moment alone in the library, I found a journal hidden behind a row of books. Its pages were filled with Julian's handwriting, sharp and precise, detailing battles, strategies, and dreams. I see him still. One entry read: a soldier with eyes like the sea, gone too soon. I am half a man without him. My breath caught. He remembered me. Not as Elias, but as Caleb. He carried the weight of our past, just as I did. I was still clutching the journal when he entered, his face darkening at the sight. What are you doing? He demanded, crossing the room in 3 strides. I faltered, clutching the book like a lifeline. I didn't mean to pry. He snatched it from my hands, his fingers brushing mine. The touch was electric, a spark that lit up memories of stolen kisses and whispered vows. You have no right, he said, but his voice cracked, betraying him. Then tell me, I said, stepping closer, reckless. Tell me why you keep me here. Why you look at me like you're seeing a ghost. He froze, his eyes searching mine. For the first time, I saw fear in him, not of me, but of what I might mean. You remind me of someone, he said finally, voice barely above a whisper. Someone I failed. My heart ached, but I couldn't tell him the truth, not yet. Instead, I reached out, resting my hand on his arm. You didn't fail him, I said softly. He's still here. The estate was a labyrinth of secrets, and I was unraveling them one by one. Julian's journal became my obsession, its pages a map to the man he'd become. He wrote of guilt, of a love he believed he'd betrayed, of a war he no longer wanted but couldn't escape. Each word was a piece of him, a piece of us, and it fueled my resolve to reach him before it was too late. But danger was closing in. Whispers of rebellion stirred among the servants, some loyal to the Free States, others to their own agendas. I overheard talk of an assassination plot not against Julian, but against me. The Dominion's council saw me as a liability, a spark that could ignite Julian's doubts about their cause. They wanted me gone, and they weren't subtle about it. Poison wine appeared at my table one night. A shadowed figure followed me through the gardens. I was no stranger to survival me past life, as Caleb had taught me to fight, but this was a different kind of war. One waged in glances and whispers. Julian noticed the threats, though he never spoke of them directly. Instead, he doubled my guard. His orders sharp, but his eyes soft when they met mine. You're more trouble than you're worth, he muttered one evening as we walked the estate's perimeter, his coat brushing against my arm. Then send me away. I challenged, stopping to face him. The wind carried the scent of pine and distant smoke, a reminder of the war beyond these walls. He didn't answer, just stared at me, his jaw tight. I can't, he said finally, and the admission felt like a victory. Our moments alone grew rarer, stolen in fleeting glances or brief to chase a hand on my shoulder, a lingering look across a crowded room. But each one was a thread, weaving us closer. I began to leave hints of my true self, hoping to spark his memory. I hummed the folk song we'd loved, left a sprig of willow on his desk, spoke of battles only Caleb would know. He noticed, his suspicion sharpening, but so did his curiosity. He was a general, trained to see patterns, and I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. One night, during a gala meant to rally Dominion supporters, I saw my chance. The ballroom was a sea of gold and crimson, the air thick with perfume and ambition. Julian stood at the center, a beacon of power, but his eyes kept finding me. I wore a tailored suit, a gift from him, its deep blue fabric a quiet rebellion against the Concubine's silks. As the music swelled, I slipped onto the balcony, knowing he'd follow. "You're playing a dangerous game," he said, closing the door behind him. The night was warm, the stars bright above the Virginia hills. "Am I?" I leaned against the railing, heart racing. "Or are you the one afraid to lose?" He stepped closer, his breath hitching. "You speak like you know me, like you've always known me." I took a risk, the biggest yet. "Maybe I do," I said, voice low. "Maybe I know the boy who loved apples and starlight, who dreamed of a world without war." His face paled, and for a moment, I thought I'd gone too far. But then he grabbed my wrist, pulling me close. "Who are you?" he whispered, voice raw. "Why do I feel like I've lost you before?" I wanted to tell him everything to confess that I was Caleb, reborn, that our love had survived death itself. But the words caught in my throat, drowned by the sound of shattering glass. A scream tore through the night, and the ballroom erupted in chaos. The assassination attempt came not for me, but for Julian. A masked figure lunged from the shadows, blade flashing, but I was faster. Years as Caleb had honed my instincts, and I tackled the attacker, pinning him to the ground. The crowd screamed, soldiers rushing in, but Julian's eyes were on me, wide with shock. "You saved me," he said later, in the quiet of his study. The attacker bound and taken away. His voice was unsteady, his hand still gripping mine. "I told you," I said, meeting his gaze. "I'm not as weak as you think." He didn't let go, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "You're no concubine," he said, almost to himself. "You're something else entirely." The truth was on the tip of my tongue, but fear held me back. If he knew I was Caleb, would he believe me? Or would he see me as a threat, a ghost come to haunt him? I needed time to make him see, time to save him from the war that was tearing him apart. But time was running out. The next morning, a messenger arrived with news. The Free States had launched a desperate offensive, their last stand against the Dominion. Julian was to lead the counterattack, a battle that would decide the war's end. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me, that this was where Caleb had died, where I had died, in another life, on a blood-soaked field. "I'm coming with you," I told him, standing in his chambers as he packed his gear. He laughed. A harsh sound. You're no soldier. I stepped closer, unflinching. Try me. The battlefield was a nightmare of mud and fire. The air thick with smoke and the cries of the dying. I rode at Julian's side, disguised as one of his aides, my heart pounding with memories of my past life. This was the place where Caleb fell, where I'd whispered Julian's name as the world faded. I wouldn't let it happen again, not to him, not to us. Julian was a force, his command sharp, his presence a beacon in the chaos. But I saw the toll it took, the way his hands trembled when he thought no one was watching, the way his eyes lingered on the fallen. He was fighting for a nation that had broken him, and I was running out of time to make him see the truth. As night fell, we took shelter in a crumbling barn. The battle paused, but not over. Rain drummed on the roof, and Julian sat by a small fire, his face drawn. "Why are you here, Elias?" he asked, voice low. "You could have stayed behind. Safe." Safe, I scoffed, sitting beside him. "There's no safety in a world without you." He turned to me, eyes searching, and I saw a spark of recognition, faint but growing. "You speak like him," he said, almost to himself. "Like Caleb." My breath caught. This was it. "Julian," I said, voice trembling. "I am Caleb. I died for you, and I came back for you. I've always loved you." He stared at me, disbelief warring with something deeper, something true. "That's impossible," he whispered, but he didn't pull away when I took his hand. "Then tell me why you feel it," I said, pressing his hand to my chest. "Tell me why your heart knows mine." The barn seemed to hold its breath, the rain a soft curtain around us. Slowly, he leaned forward, his forehead resting against mine. "Caleb," he murmured, testing the name, and it was like a dam breaking. He kissed me, fierce and desperate, and for the first time in this life, I felt whole. The battle resumed at dawn, and with it, our chance to change everything. Julian was different now, his resolve tempered by something new hope. He confided in me that he'd grown to hate the war, that he dreamed of a world where we could be free. But the Dominion's grip was tight, and his generals watched him closely, suspicious of his shifting loyalties. I had a plan, reckless but necessary. The Free State's leader, a woman named Mara, was still alive, hiding in the nearby woods. If I could reach her, I could broker a truce not just for the war, but for Julian. He was the Dominion's heart. If he turned, others would follow. Under cover of night, I slipped away, leaving Julian a note, "Trust me. I'll come back." The woods were a maze, but I found Mara, her eyes sharp with distrust. "You're the concubine," she spat. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I was one of you," I said, and told her my story, Caleb's story. She listened, her expression softening, and by morning, we drafted terms for peace. But when I returned to the barn, Julian was gone. The Dominion's generals had accused him of treason, spurred by rumors of our closeness. They'd taken him to face trial or execution. I rode back to the estate, heart in my throat, knowing every second mattered. The trial was a sham, a public spectacle to cement the Dominion's power. Julian stood in chains, his face bruised but defiant, as the council condemned him. I pushed through the crowd, my voice ringing out, He's no traitor. He's the only one brave enough to want peace. The room fell silent. All eyes on me. I told them everything me rebirth. Our love. The truce I'd secured. I spoke of a future where nations could heal. Where love could outlast war. Some scoffed. But others listened. Their faces softening. Julian's eyes never left mine. And in them, I saw pride. Love. And a fire that hadn't died. Mara arrived. Flanked by Free State soldiers. Her presence a shock to the council. She presented the truce. Her voice steady. And slowly, the tide turned. The crowd began to murmur. Then chant. Demanding peace. The generals, outnumbered, relented. Months later, the war was over. The truce held. Fragile but growing stronger. Julian and I stood in the garden where we'd first met in this life. The roses now in full bloom. He took my hand. His smile soft. You saved me, he said, echoing that night in his study. No, I replied, leaning into him. We saved each other. The world wasn't perfect. Hate still lingered, and scars ran deep. But we'd carved out a space for love, for hope, for a future neither of us had dared dream. And as the fireflies danced around us, I knew we'd keep fighting for our nations, for each other, for a love reborn.